guest, Greg Fox. He's got a ex-NBL player, administrator in the league, author. We're going to be talking about some of his writing. And we're going to include you, Greg. And first, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
He's soft-spoken. And it's not all about you, Greg. We want to go through our sponsors, but shout-outs and rumors and whispers, we're going to be picking your brain on some of these stuff. And if you just don't know it, just say, I don't know what you're talking about, Bruce. Fine. All right, first, Brian Curl Basketball, one of our first and foremost sponsor, and all the programs that Brian Curl Basketball has, including the Academy, including the Owls Basketball Club, including, and I just noticed on Facebook, they've got an Indigenous and Torres Strait Island 3-on-3 tournament coming up.
Okay.
Women's sport. It's a great program. Thank you, Brian. Also, Chris Weir from FIT Education, the RTO on the go. By the way, Chris wants to be a...
Right. You keep mentioning
it's nothing more than a rumor and whisper. Yes, I got to tee that up along with our next upcoming guest. Also to Big Dog Sports, Ryan Stahlberg and Big Dog. Man, real problem with shortage of facilities.
Yeah.
Why don't you have a court right in your own backyard?
Ah, we should.
Go to Big Dog.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan. And also to Bubble Boards, to Matt Shanahan.
Yeah.
You're probably wondering, when are we going to get the sponsorship check?
Oh,
well, I told him that.
Again, that's your contact again.
Well, kind of like all of the sponsors that we've gotten. But it's...
anyway, we love Matty anyway.
We love Matty, and Bubble Boards are a great coach's aid. Now, as we get into this, and of course, Greg, you're going to be welcome to jump in at any time. We might even give you a little nod and a wink. But we're going to start with shout-outs. Stephen, you got some shout-outs?
Well, again, you got to give it to Elijah Pepper over in the West playing. He's had another 50-point game, 10 rebounds. He's now averaging 49.7 after 4 games in the NBL 1. So it's pretty interesting because Henschel is putting himself up for the draft. So there's probably a big opportunity for Elijah Pepper to get some court time in Perth.
I think so.
Yeah. And I like him. Every time I've watched him play this year, he's been really solid for them. He had some games where he had DNP, but most of the time he got court time. I think he'll be chasing more. The other thing that's interesting, how many Australians we've got actually gone into the draft. So we've got Rocco is the last one that's just put his hand up. We got 6. So we got Rocco. We've got Ben Henschel from Perth. I think he's going to struggle, to be honest. But anyway, he's got a very high opinion of himself. Alex Condon.
From Florida?
From Florida.
NCAA champions.
Proctor from Duke has put his name ahead. And then there's Alex Tui. And then there's the star that played for the next star that played at Perth, Izan, the Mexican.
Oh, here we go again with lack of research.
Yeah. So we'll just move on there because I just couldn't get his last name. I didn't have time because you've been talking and we got into my research. Whispers, Hurt played for South East Melbourne, can play, went to Duke. He's talking to Tatum through my network. And
Jason Tatum or the other Tatum, the coach Tatum?
That would be the dad.
Okay. Yeah. This is
Jason Tatum went to Duke. So there's a little bit of that in college,
Were they teammates at Duke?
No.
Okay. You have done your research.
Yeah. But anyway, that's my shout-outs and whispers.
Well, I've got a little rumor and
can I give you one more?
Yep. Yes.
Shane Froling, 3 years, Illawarra signed.
I think that's Sam Froling.
Sorry.
The son of Shane and Jenny. Which, by the way, those kids come from a very good gene pool.
Want some of these podcasts, Foxy, to be perfect. Bruce and I tend to have an imperfect podcast, and sometimes, we just keep going. Yeah, so correct us if we get anything wrong.
But just a question about those young men that are going in the draft. How many of those have a chance to be drafted?
Mate, that's a really good question because none of them are really coming up in the mock drafts. They're not in the top 50.
There's no other Cooper Flag in that mob. Good question, mate. Who knows? Like when I never would have thought Sar, who has had a really productive rookie season with Washington. When I saw him play, I didn't see it. Now I know a scout for Washington. I met him in China. Can I just drop country names?
Yeah,
I met him in China.
Yeah,
he's based in Israel. He's an American. Probably want to know his name. I'd have to look on my phone, and we just don't have that luxury of time. But he said they were really wrapped. They and this goes to show. I don't know. I only watch him in games. I thought, well, yeah, there's an athlete. I didn't realize he's 7 feet tall.
Yeah,
I thought he was
with 8-foot arms.
With 8-foot arms, like Sasquatch.
So some of this involves having the player in the right place at the right time with the right promotion, marketing.
So
and player development stuff.
7'3".
Everybody there, Rocco needs a lot of development. And
I personally think from a draft perspective that, he's 7'3", I still think Rocco could do with a year or two in college. And there's still money there, so you got to get paid. Like I just read that Kentucky is spending something like $6.5 million on nil money. So you know what the nil money is, Fox?
I do.
Yeah. And it's just insane now. We're hoping a good mate of mine is Tommy Lloyd, who coaches at Arizona. Tommy came out very briefly and he played here in Australia, living in a tiny unit, Auchenflower. And Tommy, I just saw his upgrade of his contract to 2013. He's on like $5 million.
Right.
So he's in a different world where
Can I redirect this to rumors and whispers?
It's your turn now.
So this is a rumor and whisper. I read this on social media, which I'm not. Right, I'm ambivalent if you're on social media or not. But the Adelaide Lightning,
the women's team
in the WNBL, the 5-time WNBL champion Adelaide Lightning could fold this week.
Wow.
Now, you want some more rumors and whispers?
Yeah,
this is coming directly from what I read. So they're owned by a mining mob. And they let them know that, hey, this will be our last year.
Money through the basketball program.
No, but they said, hey, we don't want to be a part of it. We're going to hand our license back to Basketball Australia, who were the previous administrators of the league. And they're still going to be partners with this new consortium.
That's the Larry
But now when the new consortium came forward and said, hey, we're going to be saving the league, they said, oh, okay, well, now we want to be back in it. Now this consortium said, we want a team in Adelaide. We don't want this ownership group.
So that's going to cause a bit of a problem. Like, who's going to own them then?
Well, they're going to have to find new owners, or they'll have to resolve this. But
I mean, there's been some good news around women basketball, and that they've had with the new consortium that base salaries for lower players, and it's what they're calling pro rata to the men.
Yeah. Also, in that same article, they were talking about they want to get a team in Brisbane.
Wow.
Could they move the license? They want to keep a team in Adelaide, they say, but they'd like a team in Brisbane. What was the other one? There was another team in Sydney, perhaps.
But mate, where does he play here in Brisbane? We lack facilities. They're not going to be able to women's program not going to be able to afford the entertainment centre like in town. I doubt it. So you're looking at places like
maybe somewhere in between the Gold Coast, Brisbane. Gold Coast is better situated for it, facility-wise.
Yes, they have tried the Logan experiment.
That's right.
Previously, and mixed results, of course. I think it goes back to what you're saying about Adelaide and the new owners of the league wanting a rebrand and have a different look about it, because it does come across a bit stale or bland, whether you're looking at the television or whether you're listening to the same coaches that are just continually being recycled in women's basketball. We really need to have even a different style of play.
Boy, I tell you, Greg, it's hard. I watch the WNBL, and then you watch the WNBA. It's like kids running and crawling. The skill level is, and the athleticism.
But I think we have 12 Aussies, females, in the WNBA, which is outstanding.
And our women have obviously performed. We had Sandy on. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to that, but what a champion. So she is a 2-time WNBA champion, once as an assistant, once last year with the New York Liberty. And what a playing career.
Oh,
I mean, she's an absolute goat. And you watch them play. I mean, that's the difference between, and it's kind of like that with the men too. We're just not as skilled as what you're seeing right now. I mean, Houston just thumped Golden State today.
Really?
Whacked them. And I'm expecting the Timberwolves to do the same to the Lakers. Hey,
They'll be the Lakers out. They'll be the Lakers out.
Yeah, they're down 3-1.
Yeah, they won't come back from that.
Though now it's 3-2. Yeah, the Warriors were up 3-1.
Yeah,
and lost in Houston today. So now they can go back. They can close that out in the Bay Area.
Okay.
Let's get into Greg Fox.
Mate, Greg Fox. So I was very lucky to be a teammate of my great friend Greg Fox, and I have to say that a couple of years I was at the Bullets with Foxy. That he definitely was, up there as one of my favourite players to be. We just got on really well. We had some good trips, didn't we, to the US?
We did,
yeah. So Foxy, let's just run through the numbers here and just correct me if I'm wrong. Bruce will bag my researching. 1988, first game. No, 1989.
89.
Yeah.
Actually, you are correct, and there's going to be something that I'd like to bring up with Bruce, that this will be a connection.
Are we still
Bruce.
friends?
Yes, we're still friends. My first game as a Brisbane Bullet was at the University of the Pacific.
I was there. Because I happened to be in town. My lovely wife, Carol, shout out, name drop. She's from Stockton. And that's my alma mater. And I came and Curly and I had gone way back. And I watched that game. And it was the first time I don't know if we were introduced to one another. Brian had some kind of reservations about introducing me to you.
I don't know.
But I was at that game at the Spanos Center.
At the Spanos Center, and I think it was the very first game of their coach. He had come in at that time, Thomason.
Yes.
Something like that.
He was alumni. Coached high school there. I can't remember his first name. Good coach.
A lot of success later on.
Yes. Yeah. Hard place to go. Can I drop some names of some University of Pacific graduates? Pete Carroll, the head coach now of Las Vegas, had been the coach of. He's one of the few coaches who has won an NC2A championship and an NFL championship. Can I keep dropping some names? Jamie Lee Curtis, right, was a UOP. Correct.
Did not know that.
He said, Jamie Lee, will you stop eyeballing my crotch area?
Yeah.
No. So she only went one year. Her mother, who was
Did she walk around on campus?
I really like Bruce. No, she was there, and in fact, somebody had to point her out to, and I go, so who in the But her mother was the one from Psycho.
Janet Lee.
Thank you. Name that. Good name drop. More though. Tom Flores.
It is.
NC2A champ John Gianelli on the New York Knicks championship team. He's a UOP grad. There's a slew more, mostly in football and gridiron.
Okay.
But, names that we won't matter here. Names that will probably get interruptions from Steve.
Nice to see you get so excited about your alma mater.
Well, there's a little bit of pride.
And now that we know, that's where Greg played his first game for the Bullets.
That's right.
That's crazy.
Now, did you not play collegiate basketball?
I did.
Name of that school?
Atlantic Christian College in North Carolina.
Okay.
And I want to share my research now called Barton College.
Correct.
Barton College. Oh.
It was an NAIA school at that time.
Right.
And it's now Division 2 NCAA. And I wanted to go to college when I was playing on the Gold Coast, and I was lucky enough to have a coach come to town at the end of 1986, and his name was Tom Wisman.
Oh, wait. Name dropping. He gets our podcast sent to him direct. Yeah.
And he's a good man, and Bruce and Tom are tight.
Great man. He helped me a lot. He helped basketball on the Gold Coast a lot because it was by and large not going anywhere when Tom came. We were in the state league, but we were super unprofessional. Tom come to town with a plan, which was to get to the NBL and help young players like myself. And then he got
that 1987 team of yours was a series. So we're now calling them the Cougars.
That's correct.
That you named some of the guys in that team. That was a great team. Yeah, so that's Johnny Grantham.
Yeah, and Roger was on that team. Was
Luke in that?
No, Luke come the following year.
Brett Hutchins would have been.
Brett Hutchins, and we had Dale Roberts was our import.
He was tough as hell.
From Appalachian State. That's Stanley Roberts' uncle, who later played for the Clippers and played at LSU.
Wow.
We had another guy, Marvin Johnson, who'd played at New Mexico with Michael Cooper, which is what the connection was, because Tom was a graduate assistant coach, maybe.
At New Mexico. Yeah.
Under Norm Ellenberger.
That's right.
That guy could play too, couldn't he?
You know what's really refreshing?
What?
Is to have a guest that's got a memory. Can recall.
Well, I mean, we have had Curly on here.
Simon's recall was unbelievable.
I was just teaching Brian about his age, but anyway.
So Tom at that time in '86, I just, he come to town. I said, I want to go to the States, but didn't know how to do it anyway. He had a friend, because Tom's from Quincy, Illinois, and he had a friend, Mike Hanks, who was then the coach at South Alabama. So I had actually signed a scholarship to go to the University of South Alabama. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, the friend, Mike Hanks, was fired by the athletic director, and they sort of ripped up my scholarship before I got there. And in those days, like, going to the States
was unheard of.
Well, when I first said I would sign with University of South Alabama, they said, okay, we'll send the scholarship papers. Well, the scholarship papers never got here because they sent them in the mail, but not airmail, by sea.
No.
So 6 months later.
6 months later, or they resent them. And, this is a time.
This is before facsimiles.
It was $4 a minute phone calls.
Oh.
So it was quite an expensive thing. And to make a long story short, I was given the option to go to this smaller school in North Carolina, which I did. But that was, by and large, Tom's help that happened.
Yeah. Yeah. How long were you at Florida Atlantic Christian?
Atlantic Christian
I'm sorry,
College.
Atlantic.
I was there into my second year when I realised that it wasn't going to pan out for a number of reasons, like some of these smaller schools.
But can I ask, did you meet your beautiful wife there?
We'll get to that in a moment.
Okay.
Some of these smaller schools probably lack some resources, and I was looking to improve myself as a player, so you got the coaching element. And then I was in touch with Simon Curl, of course, because the Bullets had wanted to get me involved prior. So hence I decided to leave Atlantic Christian College and I flew to San Francisco. Which I met the team for the first time. Well, I knew some of the guys because I played in the Brisbane comp and that sort of thing. And Ron Radliff was my first roommate on the tour. And, we just sat down and watched an NBA game.
He's a classic, isn't he?
Just the best.
Yeah.
Just the best.
Yeah.
Bringing a new guy in and just making them feel at home.
And Ronnie's just the most laid back American you've ever met in your life. Yeah,
He's one of the all-time greats, mate, of the NBL, both as a player and a coach.
Yeah.
Wow. I may put that in stone, Steve. Okay.
And, you know, I knew Rat when he first come and he was playing that year before Curly got to Brisbane. I would go to all the Bullets games and watch Rat play that year, which was 83.
Yeah, he was awesome.
So, you know, he could do some stuff.
He had some stuff.
I remember him arriving at a carnival. When do they do the carnival on the Sunshine Coast? Australia Day Carnival. And Rat had somehow the pages had got Rat there to play, and some of the games were even on outdoor courts, which was incredible. You know, Rat wouldn't have even seen an outdoor court in his whole life. But anyway, mate, so tell us. So you've come back, you've gone over to San Fran, you played at Bruce's College, which is sensational.
Played at a bunch of colleges on the West Coast.
Yep.
With Pac-10 schools and other schools, St. Mary's. And then I come back and I was still talking to the Bullets. I didn't know what Curly was going to do, what levers he was going to pull at that time. This was in the era of they had a lot of success previous and it was a veteran team.
Well, they won the 87.
85, 87. Mm-hmm. It's essentially the same core group.
So we're talking Sandstop.
Larry.
The island thereof, Danny Morsu.
Yes, Danny Morsu. Ronnie Radcliffe.
John Dorge.
Robert Sibley.
Sibbs.
Leroy Loggins.
Correct. He was a handy player.
We can go back to Leroy because I've got a Leroy story later.
Love a Leroy story.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really know whether that was going to pan out or they wanted me. And then we had another tour. This was when Curly was on his travel jaunts.
Well, it was because the teams we played in the winter. So we were a good Australian teams going to the college to play them in their pre-season. And correct me if I'm wrong, Bruce.
Well, Kenny Cole, we went on, the Giants went on one that Ken Cole organised.
But the colleges like playing someone that wasn't in their league for an exhibition match.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And like we had some crazy numbers at games, like crazy. Like some of those were the best experience of my life, like at Kansas and, Iowa. They were just crazy.
We use it, and I'm sure Brian did too, for your imports.
Yeah, that's where we
tried them in, have a look at them. We had Melvin Thomas come out on that trip, Joe Hillman, who we ended up taking. But, it's a chance to look at. Melvin Thomas turned out to be an all-time great.
Absolutely. So that 88 team, what imports were trialling in that team?
Well, what was going on was Brisbane had got knocked out of the playoffs in 88 and they had let Emery Atkinson go
to Canberra.
And so they were looking for an import that would have more impact, maybe a bit more size. So Brian, I think, was testing the waters, seeing what was out there. And then we had a tour at Christmas time and the New Year to Europe. So we had 2 tours back to back, a month apart. We had played a tournament in Belgium and we played a tournament in the Netherlands, a New Year's tournament there, played some European powerhouses. And we still, the import situation still didn't resolve itself. So I think Brian was probably getting pretty nervous by this stage because he needed a player of significance and he needed a signing of significance. So hence the Winston Crichton experiment.
I was about to say Winston Crichton, but I didn't want to steal your thunder like Steve does.
And Winston had come in virtually being let go at the start of his second year with the Phoenix Suns. That was a Phoenix Suns team that was building to bigger things. Kevin Johnson, Tom Chambers, and so on.
That's a love man. He loves his basketball.
He's got good recall.
He does.
All right.
He is, Greg.
So you get in your first stint in the NBL was 88
into 89
and 89.
and 89 into the Kmart Classic in those days.
Yeah,
That's right.
okay.
And
Which was the preseason tournament, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
we won that. We obliterated everybody by 30 and 40 points most games. Nobody could stop Winston Crichton. I'm telling you, he was a force of nature at that time.
He was a big unit, like Charles Barkley, like Bill.
Exactly. Bruce would remember him. And
I
then
remember it.
I think it was probably the issues that year, and I'm sure Curly's got, his thoughts about it, is I think that core group had come to the end of its run. And then
He cleaned the state.
as happens with all teams, but I was starting, I was going okay. We lost some games at the start of the season. Darren Perry was injured. Great player, Darren Perry. He'd already led them to a championship in 87, but he had a knee injury. And Curly probably got a bit worried at that particular time about what was going to happen. So he brought in Greg Giddings.
I remember from Geelong.
Yes.
Yeah.
And which was great. I love Greg Giddings. He's a great friend of mine. He's
Still today?
a fantastic guy off the court.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's great.
And he's a university lecturer now.
Oh,
He's
really?
an English professor.
Oh.
And he is, I think he did his doctorate on the writings of Larry McMurtry, the Lonesome Dove author. So he's an expert on that. So Greg's a writer.
So where did Giddings come from in the States?
I think he's from Wichita Falls
right
in
Okay.
Texas.
Good player. He
played.
did well for an underperforming Geelong team prior to coming to the Bullets.
Correct.
He was a hard worker, like for an import.
Yes.
He played.
Athletic. He had good hops.
Yeah.
Jimmy.
He
He was good.
He was great, but it just didn't work that year, my first year. And obviously, there was a massive clean out, which has been documented. It was the clean outs to last all clean outs in sports history or basketball history, and people still write about it.
It worked for me. I snuck in somehow. The least ability of anyone.
I think there was 12 players and only 3 survived.
I think it was you, Leroy,
and Sibbs.
That's all that survived.
Can we circle back to your Leroy story?
Well, I promised somebody if I got on this podcast, which I didn't think you'd really want to have me on because you got all the big names.
Wow.
Stop
I love
it.
the humility.
Stop
That
it.
I was going to talk a little bit about something that I think is really important. And I don't know much about Hall of Fames in basketball, right, in Australia. But if there's one person that should be in the Hall of Fame, whether it's Queensland or Australian basketball, is David Atkins.
Correct. Yes.
And so Dave first come in late 78 to Queensland as a state director of coaching. And part of what he did was develop the Triple ABL competition, which was a bridge to bring in that core of great players that now we put up on a pedestal like Leroy. So they had a league in Southeast Queensland with 6 teams. Each team got 2 players. Gold Coast was lucky enough to pull out Skinny Loggins from Fairmont State University. This is 1979. And another guy called Tim Glass, who was a great player. I think he might have been from Westminster College in Pennsylvania, perhaps, or maybe there's one in Colorado. Anyway, we had Leroy, and Leroy was across the road from the stadium in Southport and lived with one of the families. And he used to come and coach some junior basketball and do his thing. And that was the start of that. And I think he went home, Leroy. Maybe he'll come on and tell you guys his story. But I think he went home in 1979, 1980. And then Harold got him back to play for the Bullets in 81.
And then he went 82 with West Adelaide.
West Adelaide.
And they won it.
He won it there as well.
I remember I was guarding him I was the player coach, a white, thick-legged guard and Leroy. And, I was able to keep him in front of me. But he rose up and swear to God, his knees were at my eye level.
Mate,
I didn't have his
he
athleticism.
is, when you say play, I feel privileged that I got to be on the same team as him, and I also had the privilege of coaching him as I was assistant with curling.
Correct.
When you as unskilled as other players are, like someone like me, you got to try to get out.
Get dirty.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
you might push and shove a little bit, and you got to try to armbar them and feel them. You couldn't do that with Leroy. He was like a piece of elastic. You'd go to think you've got him, and next minute he's on the other side of you and he's dunking in two hands, and you just go, I thought I had him.
Lightning quick, explosive pops, great defender.
His length is
Yeah.
crazy.
Going back to the Triple ABL and Dave Doc Atkins, he's had a long-standing involvement with the Bruton family too. He bought Cal out
Yep.
in 79 with Dan Hickett from Iowa.
Right.
So he was a major impetus in basketball.
Brian
And
Banks, part of
Brian
that.
Banks, yes. Brian Banks was from Nebraska, and I later played with Brian locally here on
He
the
was good.
Gold Coast.
He was good.
He was absolute star at the college level. But back to my 1979 story, one of the best games I've ever seen is Gold Coast Cougars playing the Maine Tigers.
Maine Tigers.
Robert Wood
Coaching.
playing.
Oh, stop it.
Yeah, playing.
And he's on to about his fifth association now. He's started another one on the far north of past the Wizards. They've called the North Side. I've seen you liking all their posts on Facebook, Bruce. They're a new association.
Yeah,
What's
they
it?
are. They've splintered away from the Wizards.
That's right.
But let me tell you about a player that Maine had who was the MVP of that league, who was a dominator, Dave Nelson.
Dave Nelson could shoot it. Good size.
Everything. He was the MVP of the league and he looked quality. And he was.
Went on to win
With
at
Canberra.
least two. Well, they won back-to-back, but did he not win one with Brisbane Bullets?
He did.
So three times champion.
87?
Oh,
I think so.
okay. His IQ was through the roof.
Really a good guy.
Yeah, I didn't
I
get to
admire
meet him
him.
very. I think I might have bumped into him as a kid. Like, can I have an autograph or something?
He went on to have a ribs restaurant,
Oh, really?
barbecued ribs,
Is he still in
Dave
Australia?
Nelson style.
Okay.
I don't know if he is or not, but I played against him in '82, and then coached. Well, I wasn't in the league then, but when they won back-to-back, I was doing the courtside commentating. I had a budding career.
Yeah, and
Right.
I think it's disappointing that you still don't have that career.
Well,
I think you would be
the
one of
insults.
Australia's great commentators.
The insults got too much when I called Dean Uthoff a bear in a man suit. And I wasn't keeping stats about it. So that's his 27th rebound and after a game. Palmer, you idiot, Palmer. I'm up in the crow's nest at Albert Park. UDL cans everywhere. And I had more than 27 rebounds. And I thought, man, I'm not keeping stats. I'm just building you up. Not the Hollywood, Mal Hollywood, what was the referee's name? Mal Cooper. He got the name Hollywood Mal. Yours truly, Rodney Behind. That's why if you want to learn how to lose friends quickly.
Yeah, no, they don't. That colourful commentary. I think we often bag a lot of the commentary in basketball, but the good ones are Andrew Gazy. He's a great commentator, in my opinion.
Let's take this back a step. Greg, do you watch the NBL
A little
religiously?
bit, not much. No,
Okay.
I'd be a fan at a distance.
Okay.
Well,
so you watch it on mute, just like I do?
I'm going to
I
work.
would if I
I'm
having a
watched
look.
it.
I want Foxy involved in the alumni stuff. I mean,
We'll
Yeah,
get it on to Steve Caitlin.
So
You're definitely a part of the alumni.
So just to finish Greg's career, and there's plenty in it, from 88 till 93. So you played with the Bullets and then you finished your career at the Rollers.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us about the Rollers period when you went back to the Gold Coast.
Well, I was with Dave Claxton,
Yep.
who I had a relationship with in Brisbane as an assistant coach.
Correct.
And we'd had some success. The truth of it was I had an injury in 91, which hadn't really resolved itself, and I was playing on one leg. And I went back to the coast and thought, well, what else are you going to do with your life at that time? I was still playing. Obviously, I played with the Rollers for 1 year and got myself enrolled at Griffith University because they had a deal with them. So I did that, and then that led on to some of the sport management stuff.
Yeah. Mate, you've got a massive, you did 3 years of Queensland basketball, and we'll get on to Queensland basketball. So we'll jot that in your notes, Bruce. We never let Queensland basketball off the hook. And then maybe, was it 8 or 9 years at the Seahawks, the Northern Association, which started Runaway Bay, is that correct?
Yes.
So explain that.
We
Let's
had,
backpedal.
Oh, did I miss something?
Well, I want to know, what was your role with BQ?
I was a junior development coordinator. So at that time, we had regional directors of coaching.
Yeah.
And I worked with those staff members on participation programs, the camps, the clinics, etc. So I was sort of lassoing them to get them to work on their projects within their region.
Was Harold Peacock the president of BQ then, or who was the CEO then?
Bob Henry from Maryborough was Bob was a lovely gentleman. He was from Maryborough, and he was one of those people that had been around in basketball for quite a while. And so I come in and work, obviously at the old Auchenflower offices. And Bob was the president, and the Norm McConnellys and
Who was the
people.
director of coaching then?
When I first come, Warwick Can was.
Okay.
Yeah, so we had different people come in and out over the time I was there, and then I'd done my 3 to 4 years in Brisbane and wanted to get back to the coast. And then I essentially got back to that Runaway Bay project at that new facility, which was, to being there and just sort of sitting there. But that was at a time when people were very concerned, even more so than now, about facilities. Like there weren't any.
There's still none.
There's still none. And so people were very concerned about state sporting organisations, Basketball Queensland and Queensland Netball. They were all running around trying to develop their own facilities. I won't go into that, but some of that ended in tears at the time. There was a time when Basketball Queensland and Queensland Netball were trying to work together to develop facilities. Yes. So that was around that time that I was at Runaway Bay, and we basically...
How many courts there?
We had 4 courts, but we had other schools nearby that we would use, and we were starting that from scratch, which is about the time I saw you, Bruce, after a few years. Remember, we had the Great Mates game.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes. And so I was just building that program up steadily to where we could, have our own teams playing in rep classics and rep and QSL, whatever.
When you say we, who is with you?
I just had a team. Well, we had a team of volunteers. Vicky Sams was one of our coaches. I don't know if you know Vicky. She's still at the Seahawks. She's a coach originally from Newcastle.
Oh,
she was one of our key people. She's still there slugging it out. And so we just built it right. We're essentially a family club. We weren't trying to come out and...
What year is this that we
about
got this?
2001, kicking off, and then building to the end of 2009. I was there too, because we got it to a stage, and then after a long run as the association dog's body, you're wearing out.
Yeah.
There's only so many phone calls you can take every day about
Their
stuff.
kid hasn't made the rep team. And I mean, if there's any parents out there listening to our podcast, I know we have a lot of coaches listen to us, which we appreciate. It's still the most difficult. Well, I think it's actually got worse because of social media, because of, in our day, you couldn't even watch the NBA. We get tapes and watch it from a game from 6 weeks. But now everything's at everyone's fingertips. And so parents' expectation is that my little Johnny or Jill is going to somehow make the NBL, WNBL, oh, heaven forbid, maybe the NBA. And we know what the odds of that are. They're fucking insane.
What do you put? So what were the challenges that, like, now they're not in NBL 1, they're in QSL and youth teams, both men and women. But what do you put it down to? Why has it been spinning like a top?
Because it's a good location.
I was talking to Steve last weekend on the phone about this, and sometimes associations develop in spite of what people are doing. So the growth in the numbers just being located in that corridor. Yeah. So I think there's been a bit of that. So you have what looks like a lot of success with numbers, and you've got new clubs and you've got people running around, but the strategy and the structure aren't quite there. And if you're not backstopping that with proper development and coaching as you go into those higher levels, then you see those problems coming out.
And you're heavily dependent on the volunteer board supporting, being on the same page. And when they're not there, they're on their own agenda. That becomes a problem.
Oh, for any, so did that happen?
I think that has been the case. We didn't necessarily have it in my time because I tried to explain to people as they come in what this is really about, what we're doing. This is going to be our culture. This is what we're going to do every day. But I think it probably got away from them in that growth phase. So then, like I said, you have dysfunction.
Yeah, I mean, I've, away from sport, have presented to boards, and it's a real, it's like in that commercial world, most boards are really, really focused on that, the governance piece, just the biggest strategy that you can then pass down, but not the day-to-day running of the business. And I think that's where amateur boards, especially as sport, because people love sport, right? That the board get a bit over confident with I'm a board member, but they should stay in their board, providing that advice, specialty, working with sponsors and connections and everything in the community. But the people running the day-to-day, the GM, the staff that are working full-time in development, and I think the board sometimes in these sports stick their nose in too much into that day-to-day running.
I would agree.
That day-to-day running.
I would agree. The positive side of this is they've got a new president. They've got a new board. Young, Jordan Mullen. I call him young because he's young to me.
So you went to Morris Ashgrove with my eldest son, so he's 37.
Our producer.
Our producer,
He's not here today.
Yeah.
And he's come in late last year.
He's a very enthusiastic young man.
He's enthusiastic. He's impressive person.
Yes.
He's focused on the culture. He's taking input. He's doing and saying all the right things to take them forward.
Yeah.
It just, you have to tell a story, a narrative which gets people to come along for that ride. So that's what he's working towards. I'm
That's
sure
good.
they're going to be back in the NBL 1.
They've been given it, according to Jordan. I spoke to him on behalf of a very good coach that wants to come out. He's Italian, that speaks English, Italian, Russian, and Mandarin.
Oh, Russian's handy here
Well, it's very handy.
in the valley.
It's not so much handy here, but worldwide it has some benefit.
Okay.
So he's a really good coach. And I spoke to Jordan. We were talking about this beforehand. I was speaking to Mark Roble. If you're looking for anybody in that, because they lost a director of coaching recently.
You know that story.
We don't. That's a rumor that we don't want to get into, or a whisper. Anyway, and so Jordan said, "Mate, we're looking for the right people. We're not going to rush into this." And I said, "Well, I think if you want a really good, young, under 40, energetic basketball guy that can help coach coaches and increase participation." Gianmarco's that guy. Now, there's always downsides.
Big word you just said there was coach the coaches, and that's because most of the coaches are volunteer. Correct. There's definitely ones that work their asses off to be rep coaches, and they because the time involved in that is huge to coach, whether it's under 10 rep to NBL 1, obviously, but you've got to have some control, not control, but you must have some input into what the coaches
influence.
Yeah, and if people don't know what they don't know, so it's a difficult thing.
I think, Greg, you're let it out.
Hey.
Tell us what you really think. What's happened at the Gold Coast? Why did it spin uncontrollably into a crash landing?
I think it is the growth issue, and
too fast.
It is. I mean, if you were to sit down and look at those numbers, then that would bear that out. And then, you've got those issues around who's running the show, who's making those decisions. I spoke to Steve. Once again, we had an extended phone call last Saturday.
It's very, very good call.
It would have been handy if Steve shared some of the details of that, but go on.
Just about decision making. We make decisions in our own lives day to day, and decision making in the association setting where a boneheaded decision might get made about who's coaching a team or what program we're going to run. And instead of just fessing up and saying we got that wrong,
they just roll with it.
And we'll make another decision which
only
compounds. So I describe that essentially as like the Vietnam War. We've made a bad decision to go in, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going
just to make it worse.
Drop Agent Orange, and then we're going to let it go on, and then we're going to carpet bomb Laos, and by the time
that's a significant comparison.
A little bit of a history lesson.
Seahawks equivalent to the Vietnam War. Right?
But I'm glad you get the point.
I love it.
But that's exactly what happens in all walks of life. We compound our mistakes.
Well, the flip side of that, we're supposed to learn from our mistakes and not make the same mistake again. But when you have people swapping over in those board positions and stuff, someone else comes along with a great idea that they push.
Well, Bruce is looking at me like I'm supposed to say something very learned. I'll just go to what my Year 7 teacher said, that you can't put brains in statues.
Boom, shakalaka.
That's basically all you need to know.
I know that because when you put this much into a club, in the formation of the North Gold Coast Seahawks, were they always called the Seahawks?
Yes, I named them the Seahawks.
Okay. That your heartstrings are attached. Are you going to stay involved with Jordan and his management crew? I certainly hope so.
We are. We've formed a cultural committee, which is going to work on some things from the top down, because we need to be working from the bottom up and the top down at the same time.
Correct.
To be taking it forward. So I'm going to be involved in that only at this stage because there's other things in life I want to do than go back to basketball every night of the week.
Once you break away from that, God, there's so much to do.
Yeah.
I was watching Chicago Med holding hands with Carol last night, thinking, fuck, I wish there was a practice somewhere I could go to. But no, mate, it's good that they're going to be keeping you involved. Now, can I pivot?
Yep.
I noticed on social media, and I want you to go into the details, that you've been championing a cold case murder on the Gold Coast. Is this correct?
Bruce, this is Greg's great hobby that he enjoys. Just share it with us quickly.
It's probably no different to somebody taking up golf. I've always been a reader from a young age, whether it's Agatha Christie or Ellery Queen or any of those.
You love it?
Yeah. So, I always had ideas on writing something one day, whether it's about sport or something. But I just fell into it. I started writing a story about a particular thing that I'd experienced in my life. And then from that, I went down a rabbit hole investigating a cold case in North Carolina.
Oh, North Carolina.
And
okay.
then
I was on the Gold Coast. My bad.
And
no
from
crime
that time,
on the Gold Coast.
And then from that time, I've just been invested in reading, researching, and writing.
So that researching piece, we talked about that before. How do you even know where to start on a cold case?
Well, you have to have a subject, and you have to eventually you might walk yourself down to the local library that might have microfilm, like you see in the movies.
Yeah.
Literally like you see in the movies.
And do you feel ever like that you're investigating a cold case that someone's got to stab you in the back, that you bring something up,
There's been a couple of times when people have been unhappy with me.
Pivot. So this is what you're currently working on, is a cold case murder that happened in North Carolina when?
That original case occurred in 1984. You can find my writing and what I'm doing at truecrimespotlight.com for any listeners out there that like to sit down and watch those, awful Netflix documentaries. You can go and actually read my work at truecrimespotlight.com.
Is that your website?
Yes.
Very good, Greg. See, we broke open some. This is breaking news.
My latest work, which I posted part 1 of. Did you see that, Steve?
She's going to lie and say yes.
No, I can't remember. I watch your stuff all the time.
But you liked it on Facebook.
Yeah.
It's a case, which is a Gold Coast case, which I'm continuing. It's written. It's a Southport taxi driver murder case, and it's a very significant case in Queensland history.
When did this occur?
1952. Because...
And the case went cold?
No, it was actually solved. It was actually solved at the time, but it was a sensation because of who was found guilty and also who was the detective who was the lead detective who went on, appeared in court, and this detective went on to be the Commissioner of Police in Queensland. So there's now
Can you drop that name?
Yes, this was Frank Bischoff, and he went on to be, like I said, the chief police officer in Queensland. It's now known that he was a manifestly corrupt individual. He was a precursor to the Rat Pack, which was all had to do with leading into the biggest event in Queensland history, which was the Fitzgerald Inquiry. So he is essentially a major part of that story. He was a guy that had in 32 murder investigations, he'd had successful prosecutions against 31 accused people.
So you're saying the wrong people got accused in this? Is that where we're heading?
we won't know. I mean, he's long gone, but the question lingers here about this figure because he was a seminal figure in Queensland history that nobody's really written too much about when you get into it.
No one stood up to him?
He was a very powerful man. Originally in the police in Queensland, you had Catholics and Protestants. He was a Protestant, a Mason, and so he had a lot of support. And of course, he had Terry Lewis was one of his bag men in the 60s.
Wow.
Obviously, Terry Lewis became police commissioner and went to jail.
And recently died.
He recently passed away in the north side of Brisbane.
Yeah.
So there's a bit just in that story. Part 2's coming this week, and I'll be doing some postscripts.
And this is great. And it's great to see that did you ever study journalism?
Never.
Neither Stevie. Did you ever think about this true crime spotlight about doing it as a podcast?
I have. I love podcasts. Nobody's listened to more true crime podcasts than me. My, what do you call it, silo or wheelhouse is in writing because I think that that's going to be there for anybody in the future to go there and
write about it
and see and use as future reference.
Now, can I drop a name?
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys know Tim Mallon. He was, and I first met Tim the last 22 and under world championships. Timmy was an assistant coach to Guy Malloy, and I got the call up when Andre Lamanis, who was going to be an assistant, but he got the head coaching job in New Zealand. Now, Timmy's originally from Maitland, but lives in Newcastle. So my little brief time when we had that trip to Argentina, I know he's a wordsmith, and he wrote, I believe, a play, if not a book, on Les Darcy, the Maitland Mauler.
I think I've come across Tim somewhere.
He's really a knowledgeable coach. He runs the Hunter. It's in Newcastle, but it's like a basketball academy.
Yes.
A protege of Dr. Adrian Hurley.
Okay.
Who's also a Newcastleite, which, I'm going to drop names.
Well, you never stop.
And, Pat Hunt.
Yes.
His brother, Mike. I'm not joking now.
From Polkies.
He's a publican in Newcastle. He was a publican. Mike Hunt. It's just too good to be true.
It's too easy.
It's just too easy. But I love the guys, that have, a great basketball background, a huge commitment and contribution to basketball, particularly on the North Sunshine Coast. But they're
Gold Coast. Can I just correct you?
Yeah, Gold Coast, my bad. But you're much like our friend Rick Lawyer, who his art is something else.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's great to see people. Yeah,
and your writing, it's fantastic, Greg. And hopefully that this helps promote that.
Hope so. It is my intention to get to a book one day.
Okay,
but I'll come back and let you know.
Okay.
There's nothing preventing you, and I bet you've thought of this, adding all these different stories. Let's start in North Carolina and then bring it back.
Yes.
And I do mean back in years as well to what's happened on the Kennedy murders.
I mean, there's always stories that sit under the
radar.
Yeah, in any shape or form in any of these suburbs, whether it's these suburbs out here, Holland Park or Camp Hill or wherever, there's always something that's hasn't been discussed or spoken about.
The Fortitude Valley, I remember when we came up here in the 80s and our hanger-on, Al Keeley, drop a name, who at the time was the father-in-law of Wayne Carroll, drop a name, was saying how bad the Fortitude Valley area was. There was a lot of crime here.
It's only marginally better now. I mean, there's pockets still of the valley. You don't want to be walking around in the dark. but as a whole, it's much improved. There's more, but the malls is still very bad. Where that.
There's pockets of the Gold Coast that I would.
Everywhere. There's cities grow. There's always going to be seedy elements, but the valley's always. It's always been well known for being, let's just say, dodgy.
It is, and it plays a major part of that Fitzgerald inquiry too.
They were heavy in that.
That was heavy duty.
Gambling, prostitution. Right.
And that involved all high-level police and politicians at the time, some of who, went to jail.
The history, and I came up from Melbourne, right? 15 years of living in Melbourne, came up here, and then there was the Joe Biaki Peterson, Russell Hinds. Who else could make a...
Can I just pivot on the Russell Hinds?
Sure.
The big Russ game. Russ took on Sally Ann Atkinson, Gold Coast first the Bullets, true?
Well, you know that I'm the person that wrote about that. I was there that night. This was the Russ Hinds roast of 1987. This was an idea of Tom Wisman, our president at the time. Russ was at his absolute peak of his powers, likely to become the next premier because Joe was going to run for Prime Minister and Russ was going to become the premier. And we decided that if we got all these National Party and business people together in the room at the Jupiter's Casino, that there'd be $1 in that. And that's exactly what we did. And Russ came and he probably got up on stage. And I'm not sure of the quote. It's in my story about Russ throwing down the gauntlet, a certain figure of money saying, my Gold Coast Cougars will challenge your Brisbane Bullets and winner take all or whatever, which was going to be a real problem because as I looked around the room, I thought, who's going to guard Leroy? And, it never happened, of course, but, they always hated us, Brisbane. Be clear about that.
Brisbane
and the Gold Coast.
To keep the Gold Coast from coming into the NBL.
The Gold Coast has been strong in junior basketball forever. And especially probably from your era when you Foxy was the stud in his Dunlop volleys.
In that time, we had obviously Roger come through there and Luke Gribble, and we had a decent junior base. For those days, the issue was that for whatever reason, this goes back to the old zone days in Queensland when Harold was running Southport and he might be on the board at Queensland Basketball, but you had BBI, which was a power, and they probably all used to have a bit of a hate fest.
Yeah.
And so, we had a good team on the Gold Coast and we used to come up and dust up the Brisbane clubs.
Your juniors were good. I guess I'm talking about the ones I competed with in the 80s, early 80s and stuff. And they were just always tough. And you had that great Southport venue that's still there today. Right. That's some of the best scrimmages in the world under that roof. You agree?
I would agree. I know I listened to your podcast where you spoke to Roger or Luke or those guys about it. So people wanted to come to the Gold Coast, Bruce. Like they wanted to come and have a summer scrimmage and do their thing.
It was huge because basketball was the winter, and so everyone was looking for a scrimmage. So there were players from all over the country that were just in town to enjoy the Gold Coast.
It could be a bit of an exaggeration from all over the country.
They were on holidays. They were just there on holidays.
When, I can remember Carl Bruton pulling in his, I want to say, a brand new Ford Telstar.
Telstar.
With black pearl and his character figure on the side of the car.
That's the thing I love about Cal. He doesn't like bringing attention to himself.
And, as a young kid, you can imagine,
Holy
Yeah,
moly.
I want that. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I want that, And so
He's good at doing that.
we used to get all the imports and come and through the
They
Gold
did,
Coast.
mate.
Tell me, was James Crawford an AABL guy
He
too?
was. He
Yeah.
was. I saw him when he first come. I think he played for West Mitchie. I know somebody will correct me if I'm wrong. Obviously, Benny Lewis was a West Mitchelton player. He might
Benny
come
Lou. Yeah.
the second year. But we had a few of those other guys that were here for a short period of time. Alonzo Weatherly, Carl Whitfield, they might have
I
played.
remember Carl Woodfield.
They
yeah.
might have played in Newcastle.
I think so.
But we had some very nice
Oh,
players. But James,
I think you're spot on about Dr. David Atkins. Should
Yeah.
be recognized for the huge contribution he's made. And
Huge.
he did a great job when he was coach. I remember Steve Carfino, who successfully campaigned for his place in the Hall of Fame, and Paul Stanley, and Jerry Denard.
Yes.
Why the long face, Jerry? And they had the Stanwyck brothers.
Stanley Brothers.
Peter Blight came. He's a Tasmanian, but I don't think he ever played there. But he did a great job with them. They were highly competitive, and he was always a voice of reason around the import stuff. So, great call there. Perhaps another article.
Yeah, I think
come
so.
out of
But
this.
I just wanted to make the comment that and you're picking on me for exaggerating, but the Gold Coast is a holiday destination. So people would come to holiday on the Gold Coast, and they got Johnny Grantham was the king of the venue. And if you didn't do what Johnny,
Comply.
because it was hard for a little fat kid
young
like
player.
me, who was a rugby league player, trying to get into these scrimmages with Johnny Grantham, and he'd just go, mate, you can't
Go
shit.
outside.
You can't shit. Okay,
How many courts are at Southport? Oh, it's one court facility. Okay.
Oh, mate, this has been there for 1 billion years, hasn't it?
Right.
Is it?
Yes, it has. They knocked it down only recently.
Oh, did they?
Oh, some boneheaded council decision. But it's gone.
Because we were laughing with Rick. Rick goes there and still plays on the outdoor courts
Oh,
there with.
he does. I don't know what he's doing, but he's doing.
He said he was backing in a lot of young Asian kids. He backs them down, working them in the paint.
And talking
And,
shit. But that's so Rick. He was good at that stuff.
He is. But so Dave is somebody I still stay in contact with.
Wow.
Dave,
Dave
the-
Atkins.
Okay,
Dave
good. Yeah.
Atkins, obviously, he's.
So, Foxy, could I ask, of your basketball career, your dad would have been a bit of an influence on you as well? And if I've got it correct, it's Rod. I haven't.
Yeah, it's Rod.
And Rod's still with us? And
Rod's still with us. Like he was originally at Southport Australian Reels Club with Harold Peacock.
Mm-hmm.
Harold was an AFL player or the VFA player originally, and he come to the Gold Coast. Well, they were playing at Southport Magpies, and then eventually Harold's a lot older than my dad. He said to my dad, Tuesday night, come down to this basketball thing at Southport. So he just come down because my dad was a bit of an organiser. And then they were together probably 20 years or more running basketball on the Gold Coast. And, of course, then I had to start, which I didn't want to do.
oh, really?
Well, they barely had a competition or anything in those days. There was virtually no junior
And
basketball.
it wasn't the coolest sport to play.
Right.
Like,
I was already playing rugby league and doing my thing, and but anyway, they made me.
I was league or world. I wanted to. It was my world, and my sister grabbed me down to play. But I mean, that's the beauty of the game. It's just a fun game to play.
Blood Oath, the joy of the game. I was speaking. Can I drop a name? Who played out here for 11 years? Casey Jones. He played in Melbourne. He was a USC Trojan with my brothers. Very good basketball player.
Yeah.
And his father, George, who we lost last year, was talking about the joy of basketball. And he goes, it's very childlike, the movements. We move uniquely, basketball players. And there's, the jumping, the skipping, the sliding, those are children's moves. And I said, that's true. But then when I dunk on you, George, who's had 40 years on me, that's all about your mama. No, but it is the joy of the game. And Casey, who I've known since I was 14, we're both turning 70 this year. And he came out, played with Boline, player coach for Geelong in the NBL. And he had Gorgon as his assistant. But, this is the great things about basketball. You guys' teammates.
Connection. Like Bruce and I decided, Bruce is looking as healthy as I've seen you look for a long time. Well done, mate.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Greg. But in advance.
We've coached a bit together. And then, for whatever reason, I said, you know what, I don't want... I've been involved in coaching for 35 years. And I said, let's just do something different. I said, let's just start talking shit on a podcast. Yes. And I said, I don't care if no one listens to us. And
you got your wish.
Yeah. Well, hello, Mum. I hope you're out there today. Anyway, but the thing is, it's been quiet for us. This has been incredibly interesting. The people that have reached out to us, asked to be on, or they've sent us a comment or a text.
But mind you, we reached out to Greg.
Yeah, we did. No, I know, but it's. I guess I'm getting at. I love seeing Greg. We live an hour away from each other. We had a lot of, when you play in teams for a couple of years, you spend a lot of time together, right?
A lot.
And, I've passed g'day on Facebook or here and there, but I'm really excited to have Greg in today.
I'm impressed with his political correctness.
Yeah.
Because there's obviously a lot more shit that has gone down with those Seahawks that Greg is politically correct, not going to dance in that field.
I think the Seahawks would be very wise to keep Mr. Greg Fox involved. So that's good to hear that Jordan is doing that. Foxy, can we just pivot?
Let's pivot, yes.
So you've already mentioned Tommy Wisman, Atkins. Who are any other coaches have been major influences to you that...
Well, you mentioned Dave Claxton.
I've had Dave in Brisbane with the Bullets as you know, as an assistant, and then with the Rollers. And, Dave's done a lot for basketball.
Sure has. He's lined up to be a guest on this.
Even when, there'd been times when he'd come back to the Gold Coast from being somewhere else, and he would literally get involved at the mini ball level again just to be involved. So, we owe him a lot. He is a special man. So I had Dave and my dad, and I've had the Mark Braggs and the Peter Pendles, and I learned from all of them. I come through a time, as you probably did, Bruce, with, back playing in high school, when it was very specific about fundamentals and how you had to learn the game. And it was almost like learning, I put it like this, like learning a martial art. Like you didn't like to you didn't like to add in your own little bits and pieces too much, right?
If you've told us how you put it between your legs, don't mess with it. That's how you do it.
Sort of that sort of thing. So I learned in that era with my dad, because he would go to coaching clinics. Different coaches would come to Australia, or we'd go to a national championship, and there might be a Ron Carling.
I remember him vividly.
Ron Carling, and there was another guy, Henry Daigle.
Know Henry well, yes.
Those types of people that we would get a chance to learn from once a year, because we're essentially a backwater up here, a basketball backwater at that time. So you took any
very much so
chance to learn from anybody on the national level, or if there was
Victoria and South Australia was so far in front of us at that time, oh my God.
They still are.
Yes.
Wow.
But I must say this, with the Gold Coast. So you got Southport School with Thalo Green and Sean Carroll. You got Varsity Lakes with Adam Dara and I believe Scotty McGregor.
I work with Scotty at the hospital.
Okay.
GCUH. He's a colleague of mine. And I see his boys having his rookie game in the NBL
USL.
one starting?
Was the NBL?
I don't know.
This
Yeah, it
weekend.
starts this weekend.
Yeah.
North starts this weekend.
Right.
Right.
So
And
how
Scott's still
old's-
assistant with
I believe
Anthony
so.
Petrie.
How old's his boy?
Ready to go, I'd say 17, 18.
Yeah, okay.
Is he as
And-
big
and
as Scott?
I see the Gold Coast have picked Petrie again to coach the men's NBL one.
Yep.
I just saw that with somewhere, and they've Mark Brack. He's going to coach the NBL one women.
Ah.
Yeah, so
So let's because we got to tie it in a bow. I know
Yeah.
you were making great time for us, but how about the political harmony between Gold Coast Basketball Association? Is that an animal?
Yes.
Does that exist? The North Gold Coast Basketball Association. Is there any other associations on the Gold Coast?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, these schools are developing at a rate where they're sort of like a pseudo association.
because they have that many teams.
They have that many teams and they have the people, the players and students day to day. You know, there's an intrinsic power in that, right? That
Yeah.
you can have
Well, they train in the same place. They're at school. That's
Exactly.
very
Well,
handy.
add the school that Dave and Johnny Zaghetti, what's that? Hillcrest
I think so.
or St. Hilda's?
Oh,
No,
is
St.
there
Hilda's is a girls' school.
Okay.
So you've got Hillcrest, you've got the Kingses, you've got the Southport School, my old alma mater where Thalo is, which is Southport
Yeah.
High. So they've all developed their own basketball
Yeah.
program.
Which I gotta say, just on the go, I don't see it here. I see the GPS schools; they all have good basketball programs, but there's no academy-like school. There's no
there's-
basketball.
I mean, some of
schools.
the TAS schools are solid as well, but yeah, but this becomes a bit of money as well because these schools can pay their coaches well. Like they look after their coaches and they want them there for their school comps, right? So that's why it's easy for them to go, okay, well, why don't we enter ourselves as a club in an association?
Exactly.
And they've got the resources to be able to be strong clubs.
The only downfall with that is they would normally have to employ extracurricular people to run it because the teachers don't want to give up.
That's what they do because they've got money to do it.
It's part of their deal.
Yeah, I mean, every GPS school has a full-time basketball director working internally in the
I think they're the best jobs in basketball.
Yeah.
So Dan George, Drew Fenton, who
Yeah,
took
Dan
the
George is
Rockhampton
incredible.
women.
Yeah,
He left
yeah,
Rocky. Drew Fenton left Rocky, won the championship last year, coaching their women, and is now at Toowoomba, right? Organizing their whole thing. I mean, they're well paying in comparison.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as pay goes, you got NBL, and then you got the
Director.
GPS school director's job, and usually those guys are the head coaches of it. So
Yeah, they're well paid, Foxy. Like, very surprised.
Better
And
than
I'm sure
WNBL.
TSS is the same.
Oh, no doubt.
jeez, they run that's Legassic. Dennis, is it?
Brendan.
Brendan does a great job, and of course Anthony Petrie there, and he's got Robbie Kadee
Right.
as an assistant coach. So I admire from a distance what goes on down on the Gold Coast.
I think it's got huge potential down there in that northern pocket of Seahawks. If you can just get a bit of alignment what Jordan's trying to do, that could be a very powerful club.
Without a doubt. It's just so geographically well placed.
Absolutely.
The demographics are good too.
Yeah.
Into the future. When I first started Runaway Bay, the demographics of that area
Was
were
retirees.
was terrible. No wonder I struggled.
Yeah.
It was terrible. But then it's, what do you call that? It's sort of a nappy valley.
Yeah,
But even the gap between Brisbane and North Gold Coast just closes on a daily basis. You know, like that Pimpamar area and
that
accommodate.
was throbbing.
Yeah.
It's when I was there last, I started the Pimpamar Pelicans, and I've just heard that they're won the club championship like the biggest club. And this is only just in a matter of
And do they play out at Runaway Bay?
no, they're all out of Coomera. They're all
Okay,
out
yeah.
of Coomera. All there.
And that's where Runaway Bay is out of Coomera.
Correct.
Okay.
They still can use the Runaway Bay venue as an overflow.
Uh-huh.
And some of the schools like Coomera Anglican College are a big sponsor and big contributor, and they're a club themselves.
So who's Goldfinch is there at that?
Yeah, Frank Goldfinch is at Coomera Anglican College.
Yeah.
I think they've got a new club running out of King's Pimpamar.
Okay.
And so the potential's huge, for anybody to get in there and build it the right way or continue to build it.
Foxy,
Yeah.
I'm going to give you my last question, and then I'll let over to Bruce. He's always the tie things in a bow.
I
Mate,
wrap it up.
You played with a billion players. Who? I mean, I don't care if you name a few. Best player that you ever played with, which is different to who's your favourite player that you played with. You get what I'm saying? Like, who's your favourite teammate, as opposed to who was just athletically scoring defence. Who was the best you ever played with? Don't know it's tough. You name a couple of you.
Yeah, I mean, when I first saw Leroy play, he was a completely different player to when I saw him play Adelaide. Like I saw him play in '79. I then saw him again in the night he took the Adelaide 36ers apart in '85 at Boondall. I was there. I was sitting in the front row. And then when I played with him later, he was a completely different player in all those iterations of himself. Like,
He's impressive.
that's what makes him great, because
Yeah.
I think his game evolved, and it evolved for the Australian style of game too that made him.
He complimented his teammates.
Yes.
He made everybody else on the floor look better.
Yeah.
And defensively, again, this is where, he was one of the all-time GOATs to play here. And nobody taught me what a defender. Jesus.
Yeah.
You had to be extra. We would always say when I was coaching the Giant, 2 guys, 3 guys, you got to be aware if they're in your area, pass fake first or they'll steal it. That was Robert Rose, D-Mac, and Leroy. And I call him Leroy because of his French background.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And so Leroy, yeah.
Well, I mean, as an all-time player, just to watch.
Yeah.
I tell a story, although I haven't told this story, on that first tour with the Bullets, and like these off-season tours, nobody's really taken it that seriously, right? Because it's off-season stuff. They're taking it seriously.
I wish someone would have told me that. And because I
Take it seriously? Yeah.
The second game after the University Pacific game, we went to Cal Berkeley. So it was the second game I'd ever played with Leroy. And he went in there. They were a middle-of-the-road Pac-10 team there that year. They were hoping to make the top tier. And what he did in that game was just control a pretty good college team just on his own. And you know how they have the student section with the band and all the other bozos from the fraternities that are on the grog for the night out. These guys, by the end of the first half, were bowing at Leroy.
Wow.
So what he did then showed me that he could get to another level. I think he even showed that when he played for Australia and went to the Olympics. Like, he sort of made it look easy.
Yes.
Like, he was our second highest scorer on limited minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. If he was today, if he was here in today, he'd be in the NBA.
He'd be worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
But to answer your second question was the guards that I'd played against, right from I played with Brian Banks in the Gold Coast. I played in the club team with Brian Banks, Tom Gerhardt, and John Dorge and me in a
Well,
club.
you guys must have won it hands
We
down.
did win.
Did Dorji get over halfway? Like, did he just
Brian Banks, good. This is pre-Dorji coming to the Bullets, and Brian Banks was into him about becoming better, and he did get better.
Absolutely.
Brian Banks, Cal Bruton, Steve Carfino, he would keep you up at night worrying about what he was going to do. He's one of those players because he could do a lot of things. Ricky Grace.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say this name who, you know, for that one season, Derek Rucker, he did.
That was in 1990.
You know, he had come.
Yes. Yeah.
And I had long conversations with Derek at that time that he wasn't necessarily sure what he was going to do with his basketball. And he'd come from El Salvador. He played a season in El Salvador, and he told me he tore his hamstring or hurt himself, and it wasn't quite clear whether he was going to go over here and do something or. And of course,
so Foxy started with Derek most of that season, didn't he? 1990.
Right, yeah.
So someone like me who can't play very well had to be in the second team and had to defend someone. No one else would want to defend Derek. He was fucking impossible. Like he could get his shot off.
Get his shot off. He had great lift.
He had great
super
lift.
touch.
And so those were the guys in my era that you would pay to watch.
Yes.
You know, like, you know, there was a time when we all probably used to go to basketball and pay, or maybe we still are, I don't know. But, you know, there was a time that you drive to Brisbane from the Gold Coast to
it's
watch.
a long way to build.
It was a fucking nightmare. Because my dad would want to go up and I had to go, but I was like, didn't really want to go, but he wanted to go, so I had to go. And, you know, you'd come up and you'd see the Bullets play the Bankstown Bruins. And, you know, that's another afternoon of your life you're never going to get back.
Brian Banks went to Bankstown.
No, Donnie Lee Cruz. Donnie Ray Cruz. He was a triple ABL player.
Isn't it good to get somebody that can remember?
Okay.
And so there were players that you would pay to go and watch. You know, the first Bullets game I ever saw, like Ken Richardson come up here and just did the business and had 40 points on the Bullets. And I thought, yeah, there's kind of like levels to this, isn't there?
Yeah. Kenny, the Captain America.
Yeah.
First MVP of the league. The late Kenny.
Well,
I think we're going to have to tie this into a bow.
Yeah, absolutely. And this knowledge of Greg Fox is just phenomenal.
Well, first and foremost, it's truecrimespotlight.com.
It is.
If you want to read some of our guest Greg Fox's articles, great kind of contributor to basketball, mate, particularly with the Seahawks. We're going to keep our fingers crossed that the Seahawks are back up and stable and running. I know somebody that's expressed an interest in getting in the general manager's role down there, who I'll openly campaign for. But Greg, thank you very much. Can I get a handful of knuckles? Thank you, sir.
And please say hello to your beautiful wife, Donna.
Can I just say hello to Donna, and I'll be stopping at Yatla Pies on the way home.
Good on you, Greg. If that doesn't win it, thank you so much, man. Good on you.
Thank you.